I strongly believe that the Fed is about to open the doors for massive amounts of money to hit this market in a big way. And it all really starts off with the M2 money supply. We're going to be talking about this. We're going to be addressing this. So sit back, relax. Welcome to the channel, everyone. My name is Nick. For those that are new to the channel, by the end of this video, you do become a subscriber. So Bitwise's CIO recently put out a post saying, great post, and he did quote the head of alpha strategies at Bitwise because, again, he's quoting what the Fed recently said, which was that the Federal Reserve is absolutely ready to help stabilize the market if needed, top official says. And we have Burr. Again, with all of the printers here, I mean, guys, the main thing that we're focused on when it comes to the Fed is, what are they going to do next? Because we know that on the 11th, they did say breaking news, the Federal Reserve would absolutely be prepared to deploy its firepower to stabilize financial markets. There we go. New GT conversation coming out soon. U.S. Central Bank prepared to act with various tools, says Susan Collins. Now, what's crazy about this is this was around the time where the bond market was imploding, essentially. Everyone was terrified about what was happening. And even now, still, when we think about what's going on around these markets, it feels as if we are about to witness a big shift from the Fed, aka a big pivot, because everyone has been trying to say that the whole move from Trump is to get the Fed to pivot. Now, we're going to put a spotlight on that here in a second, but I do want to play a clip actually from Matt, actually, because again, he was just recently on Bloomberg talking about the overall currency war, basically the trade war with the tariff discussions. And we have here Justin, $12 billion asset manager, $12 billion asset manager, Bitwise CIO said, I think the answer to who wins in this currency war is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is set up to rally significantly. Now, we know if Bitcoin rallies significantly that the entire crypto market does as well. But this does remind me back to March of 2023, where we saw banks imploding and everyone was worried and concerned about what was going to happen for Bitcoin. And what we saw after that was Bitcoin actually completely counter all of the bearish noise because of those banks imploding and, going crazy. It actually went parabolic off of that news, which I do think is going to happen here as well. I think that with all of these, tariff discussions, the trade war, the currency war, I do think that Bitcoin and crypto itself, it's not just about Bitcoin. I think that crypto itself is going to win in a big way. And I do think that this market is set up to have a massive rally. But check out this video clip.
I think it's held up exceptionally well. I think Bitcoin bulls should be inspired by the performance, and it's set up to rally significantly if we get a period of stability in the broader equity markets. It's worth remembering the last time we had true economic chaos during the start of COVID, Bitcoin wicked down to $5,000 and even below that. Today, we're talking about $80,000. It's a different asset. It has a broader distribution of institutional ownership. And again, I think what it's telling you is once this market volatility stabilizes, we're going to see it return to new all-time highs and then beyond. It's really a display of strength from my perspective.
I want to jump off of the spot Bitcoin market and talk about options market, because in the middle of all this, at the start of April, you launched a covered call strategy over at Bitwise. How does this work and what's the adoption been like?
Yeah, we're really pleased by the reception we've had for these strategies. They write covered calls on leading crypto equities like MicroStrategy or Marathon or Coinbase. The idea is that the defining feature of crypto, one of its defining features is volatility. And how do you translate volatility into an asset? Well, you write calls against volatile positions and you can generate really substantial income. So we've seen strong trading, particularly in the MicroStrategy product, IMIST. I think it's going to have a broad reception from investors who want to have exposure to crypto, but also generate significant yields and significant income over time.
What role does cryptocurrency play in a world where these currencies across the world are becoming more volatile?
I love that question. I think the answer to who wins in this currency war is Bitcoin, right? When I watched all the tariff confusion play out, and what will Trump do, and what will China do, and how many bilateral deals will we negotiate, the thing that's clearest to me from all that is that we should expect the US dollar to move lower, that we're moving from a world of the US dollar being the sole reserve currency to a world with potentially multiple reserve currencies. Bitcoin benefits when fiat currencies go lower. Bitcoin benefits when there's new space for reserve assets. I think it's the cleanest investment response to the chaos and confusion we're seeing from this tariffs, specifically because it's the hedge against fiat currency debasement. And I think we're setting up for that in the US, in China, in Europe, and around the world.
And yeah, I mean, this is perfectly, it's perfectly set up for Bitcoin and crypto to have a massive rally. I mean, the dollar in 1 year has lost over 30% of its purchasing power. Okay, number one. Number two, the M2 supply. All right, the M2 supply is like the number one thing that I've been focused on, especially even going off of like what Raoul Paul has been showing us, which is the global M2 supply, the 12-week lead, and then Bitcoin, because again, this is a lagging factor. And so far, I mean, this chart has looked, I mean, if you take this chart itself, go and throw it on TradingView and look at Bitcoin, this chart has been looking beautiful. The overall reaction on Bitcoin with the global M2 has been perfectly set up for Bitcoin to also have a massive rally, and it looks as though we're starting to lead with the M2. Again, it's a 12-week lagging factor, but so far we've been starting to catch up. And even right now, if we actually take a quick look at the M2 supply, we could see this, and we could actually go off of just the beginning of 2025. So far, the M2 supply itself, going off of just the beginning of 2025, it might not seem like a lot, but it's up about 0.51%. This is almost $11 billion, and we didn't even turn on the printer. We didn't even start to pivot from the Fed. Now, why would the Fed pivot? Why are we going to see a significant change around, more money circulating in the markets, aka the M2 supply increasing significantly? Well, number one is, let's take a quick look at the global financial world. This is all of the money supply out there. This is the M2 from China, the M2 from the United States, the M2 even from Europe and even Japan. We could actually see the top 5 here. China has been printing for a while now, but so far from like the last 12 months, China has added a significant amount of money into the M2 supply. And then even in terms of the US and Europe and Japan and even Germany, we've been pretty flat, which I suspect that all of these additional players, the US, the EU, Japan, even Germany, I think all of these are about to react to what China's doing and actually do the same exact thing. And you might say, well, that just sounds ridiculous. It sounds like, hopium, that you hope for this to happen. The reason why I think that this is going to happen is because of what's been happening around the trade war and the tariff discussions. Also, by the way, we have over here that China's M2 money supply just hit a new all-time high of 326.13 trillion. Now, this is in yuan. In both 2016 and 2020, China money supply exploded first, and then all other countries followed. This is exactly why I think that all of the other countries are going to follow in line as well. Imagine when the US and Europe starts QE, quantitative easing, massive liquidity will pump the global markets and Bitcoin. And also, what's crazy about all of this is just recently, and big shout to Subjective Views for this, on April 14th, we saw Janet Yellen talking live regarding the reaction to the tariffs. There's a good reason to believe that we are going to see a surge in inflation. Oh, but why will we? Well, it's because they're going to start to print more money. Check this out.
I was going to ask you whether you've talked to Jay Powell, because he's the other person that may have to make some decisions about how to treat all this. And I'm curious, if you put your Fed hat back on, sort of how you think the Fed should even think about this, which is to say, there's a question mark about whether the Trump administration has a put or a floor on this market, whether they can take the tariffs away or what they can do. But on the other end, if the Fed effectively tries to prop up the system, they effectively, therefore, are supporting these policies. And it's unclear whether, well, it's not even unclear. Jay Powell clearly doesn't like these policies.
Well, look, there's no put when it comes to the stock market ever with respect to the Fed, although if risk to financial stability arise. And let me be clear, I do not yet see those in play and hope they don't come into play. The Fed has a range of liquidity facilities that I would expect them to deploy as they did in March of 2020.
And right there, real quick, I have to pause it because there you have your confirmation. You have your confirmation that the Fed will do exactly what they did back in March of 2020, which was print money to save the markets.
After the pandemic, I think that the tariff policies and the uncertainty they're creating create the most difficult possible situation for the Fed, because the Fed is going to focus squarely on its two congressionally mandated objectives: price stability and maximum employment. And inflation's come down. It's not quite at the Fed's target, but there's good reason to believe that we're going to see a surge in inflation, at least for a while.
So yeah, there you guys have it. And you know what's crazy about this is we already know back in 2023 that Janet Yellen actually wants to push the debt to 50 trillion by 2030. You guys remember this? I put a spotlight on this back in 2023, and I will put a spotlight on this even now as I did back in 2024, because 1 year later, because I posted this on the 10th, okay? On the 10th, we were at about roughly 34.6 trillion. The September prior to that, so September in 2023, we hit $33 trillion. Today, we're at $36.7 trillion, which means that we have added from April 10th to now, which is just 1 year. We're talking about April 10th of 2024 to now. We went from 34.6 trillion to 36.7 trillion. So think about that. We've added over $2 trillion worth of debt to the US national debt in just 1 year. $2 trillion. With no signs of slowing down, by the way. In fact, going off of these interviews and these discussions around what the Fed is going to do next, it seems as though they're going to turn on the printers in a big way. And there was also a great update that I saw regarding how the Fed is trapped now. Inflation's at 1.42%. That's what they're telling us, right? Rate cuts are inevitable. Bitcoin is coiling. The last time that this happened was 2021's historic bull run. Again, it was 2020 into 2021. History does not repeat perfectly. It does rhyme, I will say that. The thing that I'm actually looking at here is how all of these things are aligned perfectly. Everything that Trump has been doing, and I think that Bobby actually put it perfectly over on X, great friend of mine, by the way. He said, the golden age is upon us, think bigger. Everything Trump is doing is fantastic for the economy and markets. He is forcing the Fed to pivot. Soon the money printers will turn on, interest rates will drop, massive amounts of liquidity will enter markets, and tax cuts will strengthen the middle class. Remember that the first move is usually the fake out and false move. Precisely what we just experienced. Think macro, be patient, you will be massively rewarded. Cheers. Now, what he is saying here is, in terms of like the fake out and the false move, is everything started to crash, right? We saw 10 trillion wiped out of the stock market. Everyone was extremely bearish. Even the markets right now are still kind of, bouncing back a little bit. What's going to happen next is, I do think that the Fed is going to start to print more. Do I think that inflation is going to increase? Yeah, it obviously will. Because at the end of the day, we're not going to hit 50 trillion by 2030 without inflation. This is why I do think that everyone should be looking at risk on assets. They should be looking into gold. They should be looking into silver as well. They should also be looking into other investment vehicles. But I do believe that crypto is going to have a massive push to the upside. And I do completely agree with what Matt is saying from Bitwise. I think that, right now, if we actually look at what's happening around the currency war and even what's happening around the fiat-based system, I mean, the dollar losing over 30% of its purchasing power in the last year should tell you everything that you need to know about, holding dollars opposed to holding, things like gold, silver, Bitcoin, crypto itself. I truly do believe that we're going to see the Fed pivot. I think that we're going to see the Fed pivot. I think that we're going to start to see the printers turn back on. And I think that we're going to see a tsunami of capital and liquidity flood these markets, and ultimately have a massive bounce across the board. And I think that crypto is going to experience a very significant rally. So I think now is the best time to lock in, focus on the macro, just like Bobby did say, and really kind of pay attention to what the Fed does next, because we do have a few meetings here with the Fed upcoming. I also know that the FOMC meeting is upcoming, and I think it's in 1 month actually from now. So again, we have a lot to really kind of look forward to. I think that we're going to start to see some pretty big moves from the Fed, and I think that this is going to support the rally discussion. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, to notifications on because more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, it's been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.